spent the day doing a bit of research, doing a bit of cooking earlier. It's been nice. We're also joined by Mathias. Is it Matthias? I'm sure you're asked that all the time.
Oh, you're correct the first time.
Mathias. Okay, we'll go with that then. How are you doing, mate?
I'm good, thank you.
I guess why don't you both kind of introduce yourself slightly, just in case anyone watching hasn't seen you before. So, Chicago, do you want to give us a brief introduction?
Sure. Well, I'm the former co-host of Mitch's podcast, Spurgeonomics, and now I co-host the Turns Crusade with my good friend British Knight. And on Twitter, I get in trouble with lawbirds. It's fun. You should follow me.
Yeah, I've seen some of that. It is good entertainment. Matthias, how about you? Do you want to give us a brief introduction to who you are, what you do?
Well, I mean,
as much as you're comfortable with.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. Well, I mean, so in real life, I work in the fintech space. I'm a programmer by trade. Mostly do management now, though. I'm politically a Hopian. I'm quite interested in projects like Prospera and Free Private Cities. I guess the reason that I get pulled onto streams is mostly to talk about the private production of security and civilization in general. Yeah, that's I guess mostly it.
I guess you're the first person that I think I've spoken to kind of, well, as close to face-to-face as this is, that openly identifies as a Hopian. It's kind of, compared to people that I've spoken to all the time, it's kind of I'd say people consider it extreme, even though you probably disagree on that, or I probably disagree on that as well.
No, I think it is extreme.
Well,
it depends on what your definition of extreme is, but
well, exactly.
I mean, in the sense that it's very radical in terms of what the existing world order is, it's certainly extreme.
Yeah, I guess it's not extreme in its, I suppose, its end goals, if you can call them that.
No, because I mean, it basically just argues. I mean, it's not like, so just to be clear, Hopian ideology as a form of anarcho-capitalist ideology. To the people that don't know, if you want to read about Hopianism, you can read the works of Hans Hermann Hoppe, which is where the term derives from, and it's sort of bridging the gap between what people might consider utopian, and I do too, of anarcho-capitalists that believe that there should be no government at all, and how you could form private governments through voluntary association. So yeah, I mean, I would call it like a moderate anarcho-capitalist position. There are certain opinions held by Hoppe and people broadly speaking in his vicinity that liberals would certainly consider quite extreme. So things like right to discriminate and things like that.
I mean, I definitely used to consider that pretty extreme.
Yeah, some of the social values, I guess, people might have an issue with.
Yeah, so in that sense, I would definitely say that that's where it's quite radical. But in terms of the actual conception of how the Hopian private law society, as it's termed, would function, it's not all that different from the way that society currently functions.
Yeah, I suppose when you say anarchist to people, as in like anarcho-capitalist, anarchism, people kind of imagine, what you see in, I guess, is it Seattle? Just people running around not doing anything. In this case, that there is a government or multiple governments, but they're just privatized. They're run for profit.
Yeah. I mean, if you want like a historical analogy for it, you could look at the age of city-states in Europe, where you had, most of the large cities in Europe were city-states that were forming defense pacts like the Hanseatic League, which most people probably have heard of, and the Lombard League, which is the equivalent in northern Italy, and Decapole, which is the equivalent in the area in between France and Germany. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of historical precedents for this in European history. There's in particular a couple of examples that I would point people to if they want to read about the specific history that is basically one-to-one with what Hoppians want, obviously modified for a modern context, right? But if you want to read about the way that a private law society would essentially function, I recommend picking up a book about the Republic of Genoa called A Companion to Medieval Genoa, where they go into great detail about both the economic and political and legal system of the Republic of Genoa.
No, that's interesting because I guess the idea behind correct me if I'm wrong here, but the idea behind the private law society is that you sign a literal contract to join it.
Yes.
So that's how it worked in Genoa?
Yeah, basically. I mean, the Republic of Genoa was quite interesting because it wasn't really a state as such. You had multiple different power structures inside of the Republic. So you had like some areas that were owned by the aristocracy, for example. There's like 5 major families in Genoa, and you probably even know about some of them, like the Dorias, for example. Like if you are into military history, you definitely know who the Dorias are. They, one of the most famous admirals in world history come from the Doria family. And then you have the Grimaldis as well.
Yes, I've heard of them.
Yeah, I mean, they're still in charge of Monaco, which Monaco was actually a part of the Republic of Genoa back then.
Right, yeah, because I've been looking into the guy behind the Free Private Cities sort of idea. Is it Titus Gabel?
Yes.
And he lives in Monaco, doesn't he?
I believe so, yeah. I actually haven't talked to him that much about where he's staying right now.
Well, from what I've watched a few interviews with him about this idea, and he seems to kind of hold up Monaco as a modern day example. Obviously, you've got historical examples, like you said, but Monaco,
yes,
there's a very strict immigration idea. It's you have to be vetted quite well, strictly in order to even move there, and there's not that many people who are actually native. What's the word? Monacoans?
No, I can't remember how they say it. There is like a word that's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Monaco is one of the examples. Another example that I typically point to is Liechtenstein, and not so much because they have the opt-in, but because they have opt-out. So, like in Liechtenstein, most people don't know this, but first of all, it's an absolute monarchy. And secondly, if you want to leave with your property, and I'm not talking like taking your possessions that are in your house with you, I'm talking about taking your land with you, you can do that.
Wait, so even if you live in the center of the country,
state or form a different, you can form a different state. It's based on a town level, so it's not just each individual property owner that can do it. But if a town votes, for example, to join the United States, they could do that.
That's hilarious.
I mean, if the United States would have them, right? But
have any done that recently? Joined another country?
No, I mean, nobody wants to leave because it's incredibly well run.
I was going to say, yeah. So it's also, you say it's an absolute monarchy, because that's something that Hopper talks about as well, from the very little that I've read of his, that he prefers living in a monarchy, or he would prefer living in a monarchy to living in a democracy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's a book that I actually highly recommend to people that are still not red-pilled on the whole democracy question. Hopper has written a book called Democracy, the God That Failed. And I think after you read that and you take like maybe a month to like really think about it, you're going to realize how bad of an idea democracy really is.
Yeah, I was listening to it was a Mises Institute podcast the other day on YouTube. It was with an Indian Hopian guy, and he was talking, basically ripping to shreds the post-colonial India because of this exact reason, that he said that it's so terribly run, and that the democracy, basically he laid out the step-by-step how India had gone downhill after the colonialist rule because of this.
Bring back the Raj, please.
Well, as an Englishman, it's something that I'll beat Indian friends over the head with.
Well, I mean, you get the last laugh in that. Now you don't have to go and pay taxes to fund the Raj anymore.
That is true, yes. Giving them the statistics on how much money was actually taken out of the country, i.e. a negative amount. They're not happy. They're never happy with that.
Thanks, India, you owe several $1 trillion.
Yeah, apparently. That's so I've been told. Joachim's asking about these private law societies that sound interesting, but how do you plan on setting them up? Well, I think that's literally where the free private cities comes in, isn't it?
Yes. So the first step to setting one of these up really is not the sovereignty aspect. If you look back at history, the way that sovereignty has been gained by small states is through economic sovereignty. So once you have economic power, then you can establish political sovereignty. So the first step really is to talk a sovereign nation into granting you the right to setting up a free trade zone. And there's multiple organizations that are working on this, and the Titus Gable is one of them, as you already mentioned. And if you want to read about some of the projects that they're doing, I really recommend going to freeprivatecities.com and signing up for their newsletter.
Yeah, I have that here. It's this website here.
Yeah, they send out a regular newsletter with all of the news about what they're doing. And I also recommend checking out prospera.hn.
That's not one I've come across before. I don't know. How is that different?
Well, that's one of the projects that they're involved in. And this is something they've been working on for quite a while. I mean, it's a group of other organizations as well. And what they've managed to do is negotiate a deal with Honduras where
it's the Honduras
Constitution project. Yeah, the Constitution has been changed to allow for free economic zones to be set up. And they've been allocated a quite substantial piece of land on an island off the coast of Honduras called Roatan. So they're actually setting up a private city on Roatan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that sounds similar to the Hong Kong kind of idea next to China. Obviously.
Yeah, and that's basically the pitch, right? Because Honduras is quite a poor nation, and the way that you sell this to a nation is you go to them and say, how would you like to have a Singapore placed off of your coast?
Exactly.
Pretty good pitch, right?
I guess that's what the European Union were scared of England doing, but for the entire country. Whether that's anywhere near a possibility now is another thing.
Well, I hear there's some stuff going on in Ireland where they're talking about allocating a piece of land to people that want to leave Hong Kong.
Yeah, there were a lot of talks, but they were going to do it to the Isle of Wight, which, you know, is not too far from where I'm based. So I'm not really too keen on that. I mean, I suppose with the free private city idea, you would do it somewhere where no one lives already, right? Because if there's people living there already, you can't just turf them out or say, right, you got to now buy a residency here.
Well, you could what you could do is you could try and acquire, you know, real estate. Like you could make an offer, for example, saying all of the property owners in this area of Roatan, for example, we want to buy all of your properties, but only if you all sell.
Sure. Yeah. So you would get it off. You wouldn't make a deal with the government, and the government gives you their stuff. You would go to them directly and say, "Hey."
Well, you would also have to make a deal with the government because you need assurance that once you actually acquire the land, that they're going to allow you to set it up, right? But you can set up a deal where you're not actually forcing anybody off their land. You're just giving them a good offer, and they can say yes or no. And if anybody says no, then you don't do it. Then you do it somewhere else, right?
This is what the UK government probably wouldn't do, is they would just probably force you out and move in a lot of people from Hong Kong.
I'm obviously against that. I don't approve of taking people's private property from them through expropriation. I think that's immoral.
Yes. Yeah, because also I guess that the example of a country just not letting you do this is the Hong Kong and China one, because China's obviously taking control of Hong Kong itself now.
Well, that's a longer talk. I don't think it's actually in their interest to take it over completely.
Not economically, maybe from their point of view, their own sovereignty and national pride or something.
Well, it is already a part of China. Like they have this whole one nation, three systems things going on, right? I mean, I don't think they're actually gonna go through with eliminating that system. I mean, they might take a little bit more political control just to make sure that the whole democracy thing dies out. But aside from that, I don't think they're gonna do anything.
Well, integrating with the social credit stuff, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, they want things like being able to extradite people that they want to prosecute on the mainland and so on.
Yeah, that's a scary thought for someone living in Hong Kong.
Yeah, but that's what you get when you don't realize that supporting a democratic movement gets you in trouble when you're under the control of an authoritarian state. I mean, that was just stupid. That's really their own fault.
Yeah, I mean, if there was 7 million people and a couple of million protesting, I feel like even at the time I was thinking they're never going to get anywhere. It would take the whole international communities coming together to force China off, which didn't happen.
They're not going to do that. I mean,
exactly.
We knew from the beginning that they wouldn't do that. They're just going to, do exactly what they did, which is just a bit of posturing and saying like, "Oh no, you're so bad, China," and then they're just not going to actually do anything about it.
Yeah. Well, that's a bit of a tangent, I guess. The one country, two systems idea is something that Titus talked about as well. He likes examples of Hong Kong being one. I guess, have we got any other examples? There was a couple he talked about, but
Macau is under that system as well, right?
Yeah, it's kind of adjacent to Hong Kong, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's operated in a slightly different way than Hong Kong.
Oh, is it?
The laws are different in Macau than they are in Hong Kong.
I suppose that is the idea: is that you go to a government and you want to persuade them that you having your own area with your own laws, not the laws of their country, is a good idea. And obviously, if they're only going to put in their laws for their country because they think that's a good idea, whether it's a morally right thing to do, they believe for them it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to persuade them that your laws are better, I guess.
No, you just have to persuade them that it's in their interest to allow you to be sovereign.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's this idea of persuading. I mean, obviously, if it's already being done in Honduras, then it's probably not something to be worrying about. It's just the idea of persuading a nation to give up its sovereign territory. In theory, sounds difficult to me, but as I say, if it's already been done, then fair enough.
Well, I mean, political sovereignty is something that will take a long time. You'll slowly get more and more political sovereignty, and not really until you reach a point where, how to put this, you need enough economic power that them opposing you is going to cause outside powers to intervene.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's why China have been sort of moving in on Hong Kong now, because they've kind of reached a point where Hong Kong isn't as important to them as it used to be.
Yeah.
Would you say that's true?
And
yeah.
the thing is also, the more private cities that exist in the world, the easier this becomes.
Sure, yeah.
And there's also a major change happening in terms of geopolitics, where first of all, physical power is not really how nations project their power anymore. It's mostly economical. And secondly, we're moving away from a world where you basically only have one pole in terms of, like the US being the one superpower in the world, right? So that is changing over the coming 25 years or so. I mean, China is already emerging, but even after China, I think Russia is also going to become a great power again.
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah, them having gotten rid of communism, which I guess so is China to an extent. You know, China's not really communist, is it?
No, not at all. Not in anything but name. China is not communist. I would actually say in many ways it's more free market than Europe and the US.
I mean, you could definitely make that argument with Europe from what I've seen.
Yeah. No, the US as well. I mean, like the patent law system in China is way more liberal than it is in the US.
Well, so, there's the whole meme of the Chinese ripoff, isn't there?
Right. Yeah. And in actual fact, that's like very anarcho-capitalist, the way that they think about intellectual property. Nice. Like, oh, this is a spook.
Using egoist terms, sure.
Yeah. It's a good word, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so the other one is also Europe. I think is also going to become a great power in its own right.
Yeah, as a collective, not as individual nations.
No, yeah, I mean, Europe is becoming increasingly federalized, and I don't think that's going to stop.
No, I mean, there's people kind of talking about Brexit bringing it down, but I think, to be honest, it's only going to slow it.
I think it's going to speed it up, honestly, because the main reason that Europe was not federalizing at a high pace was because the UK was constantly going like, no.
Oh, no, I mean, becoming more powerful. Yeah, you're right about the federalizing.
Yeah.
Because I know England and Germany were kind of the only real quote unquote conservative members. The rest were very progressive in terms of what they were pushing for. Now Germany's by itself and it's outvoted by everyone else, really.
Yeah, but also Germany is actually like they have a strong federalist tradition from the way that Germany is structured, right? Like the way Germany is structured internally, and a lot of people don't know this, but it's very similar to the United States.
Yeah, well, if you look at any German history, it's obvious why that is.
But politically, you always talk of Germany as this one entity, but actually, it's a collection of many states.
Yes,
and they have a large degree of sovereignty. These states.
We're getting less and less every day, I think.
Yes, but that's the nature of federations.
Yeah. I suppose that's why a lot of us are more in favor of localism, local rule.
Yeah. And there is sort of a shining light at the end of the tunnel, I guess, because in European history, I mean, all the way up until the beginning of World War II, you still had city-states in Europe. Like Lübeck, for example, was essentially sovereign all the way up until the Nazis took power.
They were in charge of they started the Hanseatic League, didn't they?
They're one of the founding members. There was many founding members, but yes. But yeah, I mean, they were basically, I mean, not entirely sovereign, but they more or less ran their own affairs internally, at least economically. And actually, one of the main reasons that Hitler took that away was during the election preceding it. Lübeck actually denied access to the city to all of the Nazis. And
balls of steel.
Right. So as soon
The
as
Virgin
they
Prussia
took
versus the
power, that
Chad
was
Lubeck.
one of the first things that they did was to take sovereignty away from Lübeck.
Yes, well, I suppose you can't have they couldn't have that happening more than once.
Well, yeah, and he was very vindictive, So
yes, exactly. Yeah, I guess that sort of localism idea, like, so you see, yeah, if you have multiple free private cities around the world, I suppose they could form some sort of league.
Yeah, exactly. Like at some point,
other.
they're going to collectively have so much economic power that I think they are going to start forming defense leagues. And at that point, then that's where you really get the sovereignty, right? Because as soon as you have enough economic power to like start projecting geopolitical power, then it becomes very difficult for a small nation like Honduras, for example, to then interfere in the matters of Prospera.
Yeah, Prospera. Yeah, I suppose if they have, how would they start project? They wouldn't be projecting military power necessarily, would they? I mean,
they could. But that's, as I said, that's not really how power is projected in the modern world. It's mostly economical.
Because if they wanted some sort of defense force, I suppose they would rely on the host nation for initially.
Yes.
And then, as you say, if there are multiple ones around the world that you can choose from, then they may form some sort of global league.
Yeah.
Hansa 2030.
Yeah.
I guess if you, because the idea of these cities is that you have multiple to choose from, and you choose the one that you like the look of the contract the most for you. Mm-hmm. So you obviously will have people moving around a lot to these different countries, and I guess there's different cities. I suppose you may get pushback from people proposing this idea, saying, "Well, how are you going to get any sort of local culture, local tradition from this?" The more traditionalist people, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean. So Hoppe talks a lot about this in his works, and I recommend actually we did a stream on the private production of civilization on Academic Agent's channel. We talked quite a lot about like how do you enforce not just security, but more importantly, how do you enforce the culture and morality of a society? And it's quite a long topic. We spent almost 2 hours discussing this.
Yeah, I actually listened to the entire stream recently, and it was actually quite refreshing to go and once again hear these arguments, since I haven't heard them in many months.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people that really enjoyed that stream. I think there's like 10,000 people that have viewed it.
Yeah, I watched most of it, I think.
Yeah, actually, the hoppyianorg, much of its editors and writing staff really enjoyed that stream, and I've been talking with them quite a bit recently.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. If they want, they're welcome to join my Hopian server on Discord.
I'll be sure to go and tell them that.
Yeah, you can drop me a link to that as well. I think I joined it the other day, so I'll drop that in the description, I suppose, later on. No, it's an interesting idea, because I suppose if you are looking for a place to move to, say, I guess all these places initially would have to start in the developing world, right? It would be pretty inconceivable to say to Germany or England or whatever that we're going to set up a free private city, because there's no sort of, I mean, as we kind of said with the people from Hong Kong moving here, there's no kind of virgin soil, I suppose.
No, not really. I think there's a lot of people in Europe that would really like to go back to this, but unfortunately, politically, it's just not really possible right now. So yeah, we are going to have to start in the developing world, but the developing world is not really as dangerous a place as it used to be. So I don't see it as a major blocker. I would not be worried about raising a family on Roatan, for example. I mean, I would not do it in the rest of Honduras, but Roatan is a pretty small island, and I guess it's very limited, the population that's there. So it's quite easy to have security on an island like that.
Yeah, I suppose if you're, so you'd have what, Central and South America, Africa?
Africa, I think, is geopolitically a little bit troublesome for white people to
Yeah,
go
yeah,
and set
yeah,
up a
yeah.
private city in.
That's what I was
But
kind of thinking.
yeah, but I am aware of. I mean, it's kind of memey, but there is a couple of African free city projects. I think one of them is called. It's a project run by Akon, you know, the rapper.
Okay.
It is very memey. He'd set up like a cryptocurrency. I think it's called Akon Coin or something. But it's pretty cool that that a guy like that is actually thinking in these terms, and I think it shows that the people really are thinking about new models. Whether it's going to succeed is a different thing, but at least like it's getting into popular culture. And that means that more people, even if that fails, are going to be aware that this is even a thing. Yeah, so I see that as overall a good thing.
Yeah, so rather than complaining about how terrible the US is, if Oprah took her millions and started a private city in Africa somewhere, might do more. Well, yeah. I would have thought she wouldn't spend. She's only got a couple of billion. I wouldn't have thought she'd spend a lot on it. But if she, decided to go to some African country and say, "Look, I'm going to set up a private trade hub here, and we're going to, take over a load of my countrymen, and we're going to make your country rich."
Yeah, but you have to consider with people like Oprah as well. The reason I said billions is because people like Oprah, it's not just the money that they have that they're bringing to the table. People like Oprah
that club.
Right. Yeah, and it's at least tens of billions that are in her network. So, yeah, I think she could actually do something like that.
Yeah, and she would do way more good for the communities that she says she cares about than.
You get a private city. You get a private city.
Yeah.
I mean, as a Chicagoan, I would prefer that she sends the money back here to make this city not awful. But that's besides the point. And the only way to go and do that at this point is to go and stop electing mayors and put an aristocracy in charge, I think. I don't trust my fellow residents.
I guess that's part of the criticism of democracy, isn't it?
Yeah. Because, well, then you basically just force yourself to be ruled by morons.
Well, you force 49% of the people to be ruled by 51% of the people.
Yeah. There's always more morons than smart people.
That is true, yeah. Well, if think, I guess what's the phrase? It's like, think how dumb the average person is and realize that half the people are dumber than that.
Yeah.
Not that, raw intelligence is necessarily all we're after looking at most academics. Yeah, what I was kind of thinking is, because I saw some plans for the UK to start setting up kind of free ports in certain places around the country. Mm-hmm. This is part of my thinking is that like governments obviously know that this works. Like otherwise they wouldn't set up free ports anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, it's been demonstrated that it works.
Yeah, and any government who sets up a free port obviously knows that. Mm-hmm. So why don't they apply it to the whole country?
Well, I guess then they can't steal as much.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's the conclusion it leads you to, right?
Yeah.
I guess with the Honduras one, because it wouldn't be. I don't know very much about Honduras, if I'm honest. Like the government there, if they looked at, because they're obviously open to this kind of thinking, because they're in talks to set up a private city. So why not just apply it to their whole country, if from their point of view?
Honduras, just like most Central American countries, are quite politically unstable.
Corruption, I'm guessing, as well.
Yeah, but one of the prerequisites, I think, for a free private city to function is that the legal system has to be very stable, and the political system has to be very stable for a legal system to be stable, right? So
yeah, within the city. So even if the host nation, if the host nation had a revolution tomorrow, and the new regime decides they want the city,
yeah, that would be a problem.
That would be a big problem, yeah. And obviously the owners of the city would be liable for that.
Depends on the contract.
Well, it depends on the contract, yeah. I guess, how do you know much about the progress of the Honduras city? Is it prosperous? Like, say I wanted to move there, how long until I could move in?
They're already doing real estate development. I believe on their website you can actually sign up, like register your interest for buying property there. I don't know how far they are with construction, but I would guess it's years out. Building stuff takes years, so I mean, it's not something that happens overnight. It's
not like because they're not after hundreds of thousands of millions of people initially, are they? It's only like thousands to 10,000s that they want to start with.
Yeah, and I mean the main focus really is, let's be honest, it's to set up a tax haven first, right?
Yes, yeah. I guess as soon as you say that, people will go after you. But like, what is the problem with a tax haven?
No, I think I'm a Hopian, so I think it's completely moral to avoid taxes.
Yes.
Yes, I mean, I've said that to a few people in real life, and they don't take it very well.
No, they don't. Actually,
well, how many taxes
I don't want to
pay?
give you my money, so yeah, there you go.
Well, yeah, Jeff Bezos pays no taxes. Good, more power to him.
Yeah, good for him. Wish I could do that.
Well, the issue there is with the government's tax system being so complicated that he's the only one who can hire lawyers or accountants that can get him around them.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying like, oh, it's unfair, he's not paying taxes. Like, no, actually, it's unfair that you have to pay taxes.
Yeah. So yeah, you'd set up say 10,000, 50,000 people, a tax haven. I guess if at that point, like places like Monaco, they do that as well. But I think it wasn't the French government who basically said to French companies, you can't just move there.
I'm not that familiar with French politics.
I think it was the French basically said, because obviously as soon as Monaco started becoming a popular location for companies to set up their headquarters because of the low tax, etc. The people from France obviously started moving their company headquarters there, and the French government basically had to go to Monaco and say, look, you can't just hoover up all our stuff. People who move there from France still have to pay French taxes, or else. So people
this is why they have double taxation treaties. And one of the things that's established in double taxation treaties is things like, I don't know if you know the legal concept nexus of interest.
No.
So what it means is, like for a person, it's probably easier to understand, but it goes for companies as well. But for a person, like let's say that you have your family located in the UK, for example, and then you relocate your tax residency somewhere else, then typically under tax law, your nexus of interest is going to be where you have your family.
Right. Okay. So if I live with my family in England and I put my registered business address to be, I don't know, Panama,
right?
Then yeah, the UK government aren't going to be very happy with that.
Yeah. So you could move to Panama and then you can pay taxes there. That's perfectly fine. But what the government realizes is that most people don't want to do that.
Sure. And that's the whole point of the private city, is that you go there and you live there.
Yes.
As well as doing a business there.
Well, I mean, at first, I think there'll also be a lot of companies that simply get registered there, and there are ways of avoiding taxes, even in ways that aren't necessarily legal under the jurisdiction that you live under.
Sure.
So, I think there'll still be quite a big demand for those entities.
Yeah, because I guess the idea of the contract that you sign when you live there, when you move there, is you basically say, I personally am going to pay X amount for security, I guess, like fire services, stuff like that, the basics, and then the people who run the city take it from there. But that doesn't, obviously, that's like a personal, if you want to call it, a tax. But obviously that doesn't make it, doesn't say anything about businesses that are set up there. So businesses set up there don't pay anything extra.
Well, there are some taxes that businesses have to pay, and there are some special rules with Prospera. Like one of the things that the Honduran government required of Prospera when they gave this dispensation in the constitution was that companies that register there have to hire a certain percentage of their staff as like from Honduran citizens.
Okay. Even those living outside the city.
Yes. Yeah. I can't remember how big a percentage it is. It's not like a huge percentage, but this is pretty typical for these free economic zones. You have the same thing in Uruguay, for example. If you have a company with like 10 employees in one of the Uruguayan free economic areas, you need to hire about like one or two Uruguayan citizens.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess obviously it's again up to the agreement with the government, isn't it? Like you can say this is my ideal free private city, but at the end of the day, you have to persuade the host nation to let you do it.
Yeah, exactly. And once you get more economic power, then you can obviously improve on those requirements.
Sure. Yeah. If you're setting up the 20th city, you can look over the world and say, look, these ones work, these ones don't. I guess that's the point. Like, say you set up the city, people are moving there, they are signing their contracts, but for some reason it's not financially viable, and the company's making a loss, and it goes bankrupt. What happens then? That's just a thought that popped into my head.
Then it folds, just like any other company.
The people living there would have to, I guess, they'd have to get another city operator.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a new city operator, or worst case, it would fall back to the government that it was set up under.
Suddenly you're living in Honduras.
Right. Well, you were living in Honduras already. It's
yes.
free economic zone that you were in.
Yeah, I guess it's just a thought that occurred to me, because I guess the assumption that we're making is that all of this works in practice as well as in our heads, theory-wise.
Well, we know that it works in practice. In Uruguay, they've had free economic areas for a long time, and they're very profitable. Like at this point, how much of GDP is it? I think it's like almost 10% of GDP that originates in free economic zones in Uruguay.
And do you know how much of the country that is?
Like how much is free economic zones?
Yeah, like very little, I'm guessing.
Yeah, they're very small. I mean, think of them like big business parks, basically.
Oh wow! Okay, yeah. So it's like a campus, I guess, full of companies.
Yeah, I think there's like 13 free economic zones. One of them is called Zona America. That's probably the biggest of them. It's outside of Montevideo. Yeah, it's quite an interesting little thing as well. Actually, there's no securities regulation there, so you can trade securities without having any license. It's quite nice.
just turn up.
Yeah, I mean, in other countries, you'd need to have like a broker license or something to do it.
Yeah, and well, I guess all these things kind of go to show how much the regulation kind of holds it back.
Yeah.
It's good to be able to. It's good to have concrete examples to point to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just thinking back to sort of conversations I've had with people in real life about this sort of thing, and the absolute brain dead responses I get. It's good to have this sort of thing to talk about.
Yeah, I mean that really puts the ball back in their park, right? Because you can just point to it and say, like, look, it's here.
Yeah, you could point to Hong Kong, Singapore, Uruguay. I mean, like the meme example would be the late British Empire. Well, I guess 18th century or 19th century British Empire.
And if you look at medieval history, like for a good 500 years, basically you couldn't go to war without getting financing from one of the private cities. Like
Yeah,
either
it's
Genoese
Italian.
bankers or bankers from Florence or bankers from Augsburg or bankers from Venice or whatever. Like you needed one of these people to support you. Otherwise, you couldn't afford mercenaries. And if you couldn't afford mercenaries, you're going to lose.
Yeah, because your opponent can afford mercenaries, and levying your own troops wasn't, necessarily ideal compared to professional soldiers.
Yep.
JD says, "What about the roads?"
How are we going to build a flat place? It's so complicated. Like,
yeah, I saw a meme of private companies building cars and computers, the most complicated machines in history, and then can they build a flat thing?
Well, and also in parts of the U.S., Papa John's is even repaving roads. So I think we can even have pizza companies do this.
Yeah. I've seen Domino's have done that as well, like driving around potholes.
Yeah.
It's almost
there's
like
already now competition between pizza companies and building roads.
I love what they did as well. Like when they fixed the pothole, they would spray their logo on top of the pothole.
I imagine them setting up like manhole covers with pizza logos on top.
Yeah.
Better pizza, Papa John's.
Yeah, exactly.
No more potholes, brought to you by Domino's.
Yeah,
Who needs ends the brother wars when we have ends the potholes by Papa John's?
Yes, I swear there was what was it in Scotland? They had like ice cream van wars, where the different ice cream vans companies would get in like really heated conflicts, and we've had it in Britain with the British and French fishermen. We could end up with pizza companies tarmacking over each other's roads and putting their own logos everywhere.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's almost
beautiful.
like if you have private businesses in two different places and people living in a third place, then it's likely that the businesses are going to realize it's in their interest to have a road there.
Yeah. I mean, this is also how most of the road construction in early America took place. It was, companies in a small town that were like, oh, we'd like some business, and then they'd go together and say, okay, we need a road from this major city that's close by it that brings people here. And not only did they build the road to the city, they built like a connecting road to a different city, so that they would make sure that there's people that actually want to travel along the road, because then they would stop in their town.
Yeah, it's mad. Like people in like the UK is famous for having roadworks and motorway maintenance that takes years, and the reason for that is that it's all contracted to the highways agency, which don't do anything.
It's pretty funny, actually. Like, of all people that would tell you that private production of roads is possible, there's actually a work by Friedrich Engels, the guy that
the Communist Manifesto.
Karl Marx. Yeah, he literally wrote in one of his essays that private production of roads is proven to work. And so if even he can see it, then yeah, I don't know what the problem is.
Damn.
What the fuck? I want the state to build roads now.
Yeah. Oh god. I guess if you're in a position where you're seriously...
see Engels is right.
If you're in a position where you're seriously reading Engels, then maybe you're probably not. Maybe you're just in a position where you're not going to believe him when he says that. You already decided your conclusion.
Well, I've actually read quite a lot of communist literature because know your enemy and so on.
Sure, yeah. I've only read the manifesto, and it's not very good.
No, it's awful.
I've read the Little Red Book. It's weird.
I would say Capital is probably the only book I've read that's worse than Mein Kampf. And I'm not talking about like the ideas are just terrible, like, oh, these people are awful. No, I'm talking about like the quality of the literature is just terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, I was literally reading. I was reading the manifesto, and there's a whole section of it where he goes through like different arguments that people make against communism, and he attempts to debunk them. And it's just like they're all obvious straw men, and even if they are straw men, his arguments are shit.
Yeah.
It's like, Jesus Christ, this is the most catastrophically wrong man in the last whatever.
And probably one of the worst people at calculus that I've ever seen in my life.
Oh God, don't tell me he does calculus.
Oh yeah, he does.
Well, like maths or election calculus or...
No, I mean like I can't remember the formulas, but yeah.
Oh Christ!
There's calculus in there. It's really bad.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of what I talk about and stuff is to do with physics and maths. So this might have to be something I have a look up and then want to kill myself.
Yeah. It's. I mean, if you're a mathematician, then you're definitely going to want to neck yourself after you read it.
Yeah, my background is in like theoretical physics, so that probably will make me want to jump off the roof. I guess, yeah. So this is just a thought that, like, when a few episodes ago, when like in this series of streams, Sam and I were looking at an old, well, not too old. It was a document by a National Space Society in America, where they were talking about sort of future views of what humans could do in the solar system and how to get there. It had a sort of roadmap of a lot of steps. And their final endpoint was basically humans spread out everywhere in little communities, which is essentially what we're looking at here, is that you have 1 billion city-states, but just spread around the solar system, which it struck me as really counter to every other narrative of the far future that I've seen.
Yeah, it's always the gay space communism that
exactly this. Yeah, the sort of Star Trek style, everything centralized but also fully automated.
Yeah,
rather than having it being like the most possible decentralized system, where you have, like I was saying, like if you start launching people into orbit and they're living in the orbit, even just the Earth, like what nation are they part of? You know, if you're colonizing some habitat, I don't know, that goes around the planet, and they're all from America, say, well, how long does it take for them or their kids to not be from America anymore?
There's some interesting problems as well with living in different solar systems that people don't often think about, like the amount of time that it takes, even with the fastest possible, let's say laser-based communication or whatever, right? Even with that, like communicating financial transactions between these different solar systems is going to take a long time.
Yeah, financial transactions need to be on the order of like less than seconds, but if it takes you at least 4 or 5 years to get anywhere, then
yeah, or like communication in general, right? So it just makes sense that each of them are going to be quite autonomous because they have to.
Yeah, it's forced on you by nature, and there's nothing you can do about that. Like I was comparing it to, large empires throughout history. Obviously, when they've had to communicate, they've been doing it over riders. I guess that's the fastest you could do. So even though you did get large empires with slow communication, but obviously because we're so used to instantaneous communication, even like a ping of a second to get to the moon would ruin a lot of what we're used to.
Yeah, that would ruin financial markets already. So
yeah, I mean, imagine playing CS:GO with someone sat on the moon.
Oh yeah, impossible.
And let alone going to Mars, where it's on the order of hours.
Yeah,
which is obviously the place where they're going. I mean, there's all the hype about Musk building his stuff on Mars. Like at some point, they're gonna have to have a conversation like this in how are we going to run our society there. And the day is fast approaching where we're going to have to seriously sit down and think about that, because he wants to do a direct
LAN parties with Elon Musk, I guess.
But he wants to do a direct democracy.
Yeah, that ain't gonna work.
We'll see about that.
And it'll be such a sort of,
executed.
It's such a sort of like, as I said, it is nature imposing problems on you here, and it's like it'll be such a good test bed to see what works and what doesn't, and like very obviously show. If you build some city on Mars and then it's a direct democracy and then it completely fails, then I mean, people are probably not going to blame the democracy, are they?
No.
I guess that's a hard pill to swallow. Yeah, exactly. On Pluto, I've been in overdraft for 5 years. Look at the bill. You put your compound interest in, and then 100 years later, your grandkids get to the next solar system. You communicate, and you're suddenly a millionaire. It's an interesting idea because I guess it would be impossible to do like large scale empires. Because everything's moving as well, so you've got no coherence in where everything is. I mean, I guess that didn't stop. I guess there's trading empires throughout history like Venice and that, which was kind of all over the place. It wasn't like one landmass.
Yeah, Genoa, I think, is actually even more interesting in that respect. They had small trade ports all over the Mediterranean. I think they had, I mean, it was several hundred of them that they had.
Yeah, I mean, well, even the British, the empire was, well, I mean, obviously it wasn't exactly free market with the gunboat diplomacy, but the idea was that the Royal Navy could have a gunboat a day's sailing from any port in the world, regardless of whether it was technically under British control. I do not understand the direct democracy from a billionaire.
He's weird. Have you ever read anything by his wife, Grimes?
I don't understand her at all. Like she's a singer. She's nice looking, but not. I'm sure Musk could get someone nicer looking if he wanted.
She's unironically for the whole AI communist authority.
Oh yeah. But some of the interactions that they have on Twitter is hilarious because she's so out of her depth with him. There was one where he posted something like pronouns are stupid or something like that, and she put this giant essay underneath, being like, "Honey, you don't think this? Come and talk to me."
Yeah. It's strange that they have those conversations on Twitter rather than just walking into the other room.
I guess that's probably what they're used to, is just having the public see everything.
Yeah.
Especially, I guess if you're that famous.
Family is also extremely weird. I mean,
South African.
Yeah, but do you know that his father is married to his stepsister and they have a child together?
Oh. No, I didn't.
Yeah, that's the family he comes from, so that should tell you something.
I mean, I'm fully in favor of his kind of vision of basically pushing the world to settle the solar system, but I think he's I think he's quite autistic, to be honest.
Yeah, he's very weird.
I don't think he's the sort of space Jesus that some people say he is, but I'm on balance in favor of him.
Yeah, I have no problem with I think it's going to be good what he's doing, but I don't think it's going to end up with direct democracy on Mars. No,
I mean it's interesting that it's kind of shocked other companies into kind of taking it seriously as well, because you got Blue Origin with Jeff Bezos. I think Jeff Bezos is the one more likely to set up an aristocracy and a dictatorship.
Oh yeah, he would definitely set up a pseudo monarchy for sure.
Can you imagine? He even looks like a supervillain. Like, can you imagine? You got God Emperor Bezos on his golden throne on Mars.
Just tattoo and awesome. A quill on him, and he looks like a shitty space marine.
Yeah. He's going to get his genetically engineered like super muscles and his giant power armor.
I should commission someone to make an art piece for that.
I mean, if you just get the Horus from 40K and just like make his face a bit thinner and give him some sunglasses.
Oh, you just reminded me of one of my favorite April Fool's videos. It was made by Alternate History Hub, and it was, what if Jeb Bush won the election? And it was then just going into the backstory of Warhammer, but they replaced it with Ben Shapiro.
Oh god! Oh no!
Jeb.
So
Oh, the Jeb. I guess if you set up,
you should have laughed.
The only way to set up, I mean, if Musk went with the free private city model for moving to Mars, which is kind of what he's doing because he's selling tickets to get there. Like, why not sell tickets to live there? And and obviously be protected while you're there. Presumably, if SpaceX decided to become a Mars development company as well as rockets, or he started something completely new and said, "Oh, we're just gonna run everything. There's no politics, no voting. You don't have to do anything. Just live there and you go about your business." Then what would be the issue with that? I guess
I don't have an issue with it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what other people would say about it. Like, why do you even need to have a democracy, or what would you even be voting on? It's not like you're declaring war on anyone or like taxing if you're already paying to be there.
No, I don't know what the point is.
Suffer not the uncompetitive Xena delivery service to exist.
I mean, I'm a little bit split on Musk as well. Like, I'm not sure how much of what he says is brand and how much is what he actually thinks. I think there's a fair degree of pandering in everything that he says.
Yes, well, I mean, having said that, he has fucked with the people in Tesla and people in SpaceX are not especially happy with him for some of the stuff that he said. Having said that, the stock price kind of drops and then tends to bounce back as soon as he says something stupid. So it's not like he's caused any lasting damage, I suppose. But I don't think he's that popular within certain executives.
No, probably not. But he's doing a lot of public pandering.
Yes,
I mean, you have to remember where he came from, right? People remember him as, the guy that created PayPal. First of all, he didn't create PayPal; he acquired it. Secondly, where he made his first money, aside from the stuff that he inherited from his family, which is a rich mining family from South Africa. Aside from that, where he made his first money was on an advertising company. He is first and foremost a marketer, not an engineer. And in popular culture, he's considered like the quirky engineer guy.
Oh yeah, actually, he's Tony Stark
he's
in real life.
He's a very talented. I mean, but actually, he's not that. He's a very talented marketer.
Yeah. I was very struck watching, because I watched a lot of the stuff they did recently with the launching crew to the International Space Station. I was following that quite closely, and they did a lot of kind of collaborative interviews between the SpaceX engineers and the NASA engineers, and it was like looking at a version versus Chad meme with the NASA engineers all looking like specky nerds versus the sort of cooler looking SpaceX engineers. I don't know whether that was kind of done on purpose or whether that's just what they're like working in the private sector as opposed to at NASA.
It's probably a bit of both.
Yeah. I guess it's every university nerd's dream to work at NASA in America, I guess, if you're into physics or engineering.
Yeah. But I think that's quickly changing.
Oh, yeah. If you say I want to go and build rockets, then you've got so much more out there than there is now, or than there used to be even.
Yeah, and I mean, NASA is not even building good rockets anymore. I mean,
well,
I mean, ULA now builds all their rockets, so.
Yeah, basically. I mean, actually, for quite a while, it's been basically private-public partnerships that have built all of the rockets.
Yeah. Well, the difference is between, even the Moonlander, the original Moonlander from '69, that was built by a private company. But NASA said to them, we want this particular thing for this mission, and you're not allowed to do anything else with it. You just give it to us now. Whereas with nowadays, they're more saying, the companies are themselves going to NASA saying, we've got this rocket, we're going to sell it to you, but we're also going to do our own thing with it because it's ours.
Yeah.
Which is a way better model for everyone apart from NASA, I guess. Not even including NASA.
I'd say it's better for NASA as well
You actually just reminded me on how insane the 60s were. Like, Chrysler built some of the Saturn rockets. So
yeah. It was
Yeah,
the market
like
was
that
free.
in America for quite a long time. I mean, yeah, so it's nothing new. It's just to a much greater degree now with more autonomy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm interested to see what like Blue Origin come up with from Jeff Bezos. I mean, their designs seem to be quite old-fashioned, and I'm kind of skeptical because they seem to be very in bed with the US government.
The new Glenn is actually quite similar to the Super Heavy.
Yeah, I'm thinking more of their Moonlander designs because they're not reusable, like the other, like the SpaceX and the what's it called, Dynetics one as well. That's supposed to be mostly reusable. The Amazon one, it also requires Amazon one, Blue Origin one requires like an extra tug to get it to the moon, which is also not reusable. It's just going to float off into space afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
So my thinking is that it's kind of a bit of stimulus going on here. Is that they just want to make non-reusable things so that they can constantly get money to build new things.
There is other considerations too. I mean, if like reusability really doesn't necessarily always make sense. I quite like the Vulcan concept from ULA as well, if you're familiar with it. Like, not the entire rocket is reusable. The engine.
They had a parachute on just the engine, didn't they?
Well, it's not. It's actually not just a parachute. It's also an inflatable shield that they use for re-entry, and then yes, it's a giant parachute, and then they pick it up with a helicopter. And I think it makes sense because actually building the fuel tanks is not really the expensive part about building a rocket. The most expensive part and the part that requires the most testing is the engines.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they're recouping about 60% of the cost of the rocket when they're picking up that engine module, and this way the Vulcan can be quite a lot smaller and still have the same payload capacity as the Super Heavy.
Well, also keep in mind that the Vulcan. Well, also the Vulcan is based off of a rocket design which is already one of the cheaper ones by ULA. It is basically an Atlas rocket, but more reusable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with detachable engine.
Yeah, which I think is a pretty cool concept.
It's a good rocket, the Atlas rocket already, right?
Oh yeah, there's a reason why we've been using them since 1957.
I was going to say it's really widely used.
I mean, not everything needs improving on. If it works, it works.
Yeah.
I guess you need some degree of reusability though. I mean, getting the engine, because obviously for certain missions, if your parameter is I want to put some people on the moon, plant a flag, get some rocks, come back, then you might not necessarily need reusability. In the same way that if I wanted to, get on an airplane and fly to some island, I wouldn't necessarily need the reusability there for just within that the parameters of that mission. Mm-hmm. But if you want it going forwards for a more sustainable plan, I guess, because I guess that's the whole point of the reusability stuff, is that it's supposed to be more general purpose than just for one specific mission.
One of the interesting things, by the way, I don't know if you're familiar with, do you know what metallic hydrogen is?
Yeah, it's meant to be the sort of holy grail for rocket fuel, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so there's actually a couple of research projects that have yielded some pretty promising results. I mean, mass production obviously is still a far way away, but if you can make that happen, you can do a single stage to orbit. That
would be the dream. Well, there's a design for a plane that does that in the UK. So they have hybrid rocket engines and jet engines that switch from jets to rockets sort of midair.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that concept. I don't think it's going to be financially viable.
Well, so does the UK government. So
yeah,
they've got very little funding. I think they're in the process of building some engines to test, but they haven't even got a plane built or anything like that. It's very much.
It's called the Sabre, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, the engine's called the Sabre. Yeah, the plane's called the Skylon.
Right. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, metallic hydrogen would be mad. Yeah, you could have small rocket engines that go all the way to orbit without losing any stages, and then presumably back as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that would be the dream.
That would solve a lot of our current issues. This is how we get our space-free private law societies.
And then you could have, if you can start building like proper infrastructure in space and, nuclear power in space and start mining resources up there and actually building things up there, then you can start, do something a little bit smarter than what they're doing with the spaceship what's it called?
Starship, yeah.
Yeah, the Starship by SpaceX. Like instead of having something that can do like both landing on planetary bodies as well as fly between them and all of this, like maybe it's better to just have like shuttles that go back and forth between the planetary bodies in space.
Yeah.
And you have ferries that just continuously fly back and forth.
There's even already a design which is pretty reusable, at least for the engine, but can carry more than a Saturn V. And that design has been around since the 60s. It's the Sea Dragon.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Like, part of its design was
the
engine would detach itself and then land back in the water. The issue is you need a supercarrier to electrolyze the water to have it launch.
Yeah. It's that thing would have been ridiculous. It's so big that it would destroy any launch pad that it was placed on.
The irony is, it's also actually very cheap to make. You just need a shipyard.
Sad Northern England noises.
What do you mean? You can make it at Newcastle.
Yeah, that's let's see. I guess if you don't want to launch out of the North Sea, if you want to do it in the Atlantic, it might be a bit of an issue going around Scotland.
I don't think I want to fly with the Titanic rocket, to be honest.
No, I think single stage to orbit, like a little metallic hydrogen space plane. I'm all right with that.
Well, you don't need to go and use the Sea Dragon to go and send people up. You can have it instead send very heavy modules like nuclear reactors up.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at a couple. As I said, I've done like a whole 2-part 5 hours stream on this the other week. We basically figured out that to get a sort of large rotating habitat for a few hundred people on would weigh as much as 8 modern aircraft carriers.
So you basically have to build it all in space. I mean,
yeah, you'd have to basically launch up segments at a time, or just the materials and then assemble it in space. Because obviously,
the ideal would be that you launch all of the machinery that's necessary to mine and refine resources in space.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Build it there. That makes a lot more sense, I think.
It's hard to get asteroids back because it would take so long to grab them. Because obviously, it's taken like a decade to get probes to asteroids right now. Hopefully, in the future that'll be faster. But yeah, I guess what a lot of the stuff that I like to talk about on this channel is stuff that is physically possible, but may not be at the moment economically or politically or engineering possible.
Yeah.
I don't know what the moon is exactly made of either, but maybe you could get quite a lot.
There's
of
a lot of
from that.
There's a lot of H2 on the moon. The hydrogen too.
But is there any metals? Like how much?
There's some. I did go over this, but I've forgotten. I wonder if I can find the. No. There was some
maybe
useful...
a little off topic as well. This we were supposed to talk about private sector.
Yeah, true.
Well, we're talking about the infrastructure for making them in space.
Yeah. I mean, I guess
it's idea fun to talk about, but maybe we should go back on topic.
Yeah, let's go back on topic. Well, I did write a question on my list of things to talk about, or things to ask, which is, can we do it in space? So I'm going to count that as on topic, because any idea or technology that I talk about, that's my default question is, I know it's cool, but can we do it in space?
Yeah.
And would it be cooler if it's in space?
I just realized one issue. We can't call it a space private law society because then it's the SPLC. And I would never say that I'm pro SPLC.
I guess one thought as well with space is that you wouldn't have the problem of external security because you could just like fly in one particular direction really fast and nobody could ever catch up to you.
Yeah, and
also if there's any problems, you just go full of monos and vent them.
yeah, stick them in the airlock. So physically removing out of the airlock. In a what was I going to say? I guess I've used the example of sort of European colonialism and going to the New World as a way we should be viewing the solar system. But obviously, the main argument you get back is European colonialism was bad because there were people already there. Well, that doesn't apply here because there's no people, as far as we know, already on these places, so you can just go and colonize them at your leisure.
Mm-hmm. And humanity first anyway. If there are people there, fuck them.
Well, it's not so much colonizing, right? Because you're not going to be sending back resources to the mother nation, and that's one of the requirements for colonization. So it would be settling, not colonizing.
I guess, yeah. Well, there's stuff on the moon that we can't get on Earth, like helium-3, for example.
Oh,
if you want to do large,
talking about like different solar systems, for example.
Okay, yeah. No, that's true. That would be settling. Yeah, you're right. But I mean, once you've got from here to another one, there's no reason why you can't go from that one to another one. And we concluded that we are the virus at that point. The universe is healing. We are the virus.
We're the universe is COVID.
And that's not a bad thing.
Not at all.
Yeah, should we get back on topic a little bit more?
Yeah.
Well, one, I guess I'm just looking down the list of questions that I'd written. Non-law-abiding citizens can be justices into space. That's correct. I guess how would you go about? So if somebody doesn't pay, for example, you then have to physically remove them. Presumably, you do it in the same way that we would deport somebody nowadays. Just stick them on a plane to their nation of origin.
I mean, it depends. It could be the case that you can seize their property to pay for whatever it is. It could be the case that there's maybe indentured servitude as a consequence in the contract.
That's spicy.
Yeah, I mean, this is also kind of the issue when people like ask, "Oh, how would the private law society work?" So it's kind of like asking, like, "Oh, how would a state work?" I mean, it depends. There's just as much variation within this universe of private law societies as there is within states.
Yeah. It's, I guess, yeah. If your answer to every question is, well, it depends. Like, it's
we can talk about like how I would want it to work, but like talking about how it definitely would work, that's the
whole point, isn't it? Is that you have multiple ones that have different rules and different sort of cultures, and you say which one that you think is best for you, and you go there.
Yeah, exactly.
If they all had the same setup, then that would be kind of pointless.
Yeah, like one of the things that I would prefer is that communists get expelled from society, and Democrats as well, for that matter. Anybody who argues against private property. But that's just me.
No argument for me.
Yeah, I guess there's a difference between like your stated preference, and I guess if you move there and you are like living there and you say, "Oh, shouldn't we vote on this?" Like, do you get immediately yeeted, or does somebody get to say no?
Do we vote on this? Gets fucking jettisoned.
Is it Monsters Inc. when they got all the shutters go down, the red lights turn on, and they're like, "We got a 2319," or the people tackle them to the ground.
You hear a klaxon go off.
Democrat alert! Democrat alert!
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, you're happy with that. Okay, the sound of helicopter engines starting up in the distance. So I guess in that case, you'd have to have some sort of private court to try your suspected Democrat.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and not just one. You would have multiple
Can
competing
you prove
courts.
that he said we should vote on this?
Yeah. Well, that sounds like you need to implement a surveillance state for any suspected Democrats out there.
Oh, I've had quite a lot of debates about this with one of my close friends who's also a Hopian. And he's very anti-surveillance, right? He would prefer to live somewhere where there's no surveillance. But I actually think there's going to be a fair bit of surveillance in a private law society. For example, take the insurance cost.
As long as you don't have cameras in my house, then I'm okay, I guess.
I'm more talking about like if you walk into a supermarket, right? I think there'll probably be insurance companies that'll provide you a much cheaper rate if you set up cameras with face recognition, where you're tapping into databases of people that are thieves, and every time a thief walks into your store, then a security officer shows up and escorts him off the property.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, because when I'm thinking of surveillance stuff, I'm thinking like 1984, sticking cameras in your home, that sort of thing. If it's the place that's owned by the private law society, well, I guess the company that runs it, like the street outside, then fine. But if it's your property that you bought there, then no. So if my brother says to me, maybe shouldn't we vote on this? I don't want him getting yeeted. in the comfort of my own home, maybe I can remove him from my own home at that point. But
yeah, I mean, there's a difference between saying like should we vote for it in like a private setting and saying should we vote for taking away the property of somebody else.
Right. Yeah. And actually, like trying to gather support for that and starting groups to say shouldn't we confiscate this person's property.
Exactly.
That sort of thing. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Or communists going around saying like, oh, we need to overthrow the security officers and expropriate all property and seize the means of production and so on. At that point, I kind of just want them removed.
Well, at that point, you're going against the whole spirit of the whole culture of the place that you're in, and that's not the point, basically.
Yeah. And the way that Hopians deal with the opt-in nature of that, because obviously we don't just believe in a social contract, right? The way you deal with it in a Hopian private law society is to have what's called a covenant, which is essentially a contract that is attached to the ownership of private property. And let's say like, okay, so we have a society that survived the first generation, great. Now the second generation is inheriting this property, and maybe there's some of them that don't have this like same ideology as the founding members. Once they inherit the property, they also have to sign the covenant before they can take control of the property. And if they don't want to sign that, the only right that they have is to the proceeds of the sale of the property.
I see. So it is tied to the property, not the person, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's not like you. Yeah, that is a point I hadn't considered actually. What happens to people born there?
Exactly.
At what point are they? Yeah. So it's like at first, on your first thought, you think of something like, oh, when they turn 18 or whatever, they sign the same contract in the same way that we start paying taxes on jobs that we. Well, even then, even when you're under 18, working a job. Yeah, that's interesting. So it's tied to the place. So say my dad bought a house in Prospero. I was born, and then I decided I was a communist because I went to
bye.
I went away to America. I got a scholarship at some American university. I went away to some Ivy League uni. Came back as a Marxist. At that point, I guess if I tried to buy the property there, then, well, I guess if I'm at the point where I'm buying property somewhere, does that make me a Marxist?
Well, it was more in the case that you inherited. So let's say that you're in university and your dad passes away, and you go back to the community, and then you refuse to sign the covenant. Then you would not be able to take control of the property.
I see. No, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess you know with different societies being set up over the world, you'd have some that might have that covenant and some that don't, and then you see which ones do better over time.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that if you don't have that rule, then you're going to have, like, in 2 or 3 generations, you're going to have a substantial portion of your population be socialists.
And also, one thing that people don't realize is the structure of a covenant community or private law society also means that these communists and degenerates can go and make their own covenant. So if they wanted to, they could try to prove us wrong, and then we see them go straight to hell in a few weeks. Free entertainment.
No, you even go to them and you say, we will offer you a marketing deal and we will make this into a reality TV show, and then we'll give you a cut of the profits.
You could also have a piece of land that is that's held in ownership by all of the people in that private law society that is specifically contractually allocated to place communists on. This is a real problem, right, with private law societies, which is if somebody is born in the private law society and is not a citizen of any outside nation, you can't physically remove them because there's nowhere to send them to, like, aside from the ocean, of course. But so you might need to have a clause like that, where you have, you know, a piece of land that is effectively a prison.
Are you saying setting up camps for communists? Is that what you're saying here?
You could put it like that. Like,
worst Boy Scouts trip ever.
A permanent summer camp.
This could be by a nice lake, or, you know, on the beach. At that point, I guess everyone.
By a nice lake, then it's no longer going to be a nice lake.
Everyone
right next to it.
Well, at that point, everyone in the society has to pay for it, though, because, well, they don't have to. The part of their, I suppose, as that extra community, whatever you want to call it, grows, it's going to become more and more expensive, presumably.
Yeah. I don't think so. I think it'll just be like a piece of trash, basically.
Like three guys.
No, I mean, it might be more people than that, right? But like the communists, it'll basically be like a small tyrannical state that forms, I think.
Yeah, I guess if there's no laws or anything, then they're left to their own devices.
Yeah, you'll end up with some guy that takes power. And then sometimes they'll like try to go outside of the community and raid and so on, and then we'll cull a few of them, and then it all sort of sorts itself out. But there's no funding necessity, I don't think. Like we don't have to give them anything.
Well, I guess if you own the land, then at that point, would you have to guard it?
No.
Yeah, I was trying to think it through in my head. To be honest, it's not something I've thought about before. It's not, because you say it's not a prison because it's just a bit of land. You know, you're not necessarily putting walls around it, because why would you? You don't want them in your.
I'd probably build walls around it. I think all of the property owners that are living around that community would put up at least a fence, right?
Oh, I was assuming that there were going to be walls around them initially, like to stop people getting. Well, the whole island or whatever is going to be defended. That's the whole point. Is that if your property gets broken into or burned or whatever, then it's the city's fault because they were supposed to contractually provide you with defense.
Yeah, I mean the city or your insurance provider, because it wouldn't in a private law society. The idea is not just that there is a single security provider. That's actually exactly what we're trying to avoid. But yeah, you would have security providers that would defend your own property, and it might be the case that there's a charity set up that pays for security being enforced on that piece of land that's held in common. I'm not saying that will definitely not happen. I'm also not saying that it'll definitely not happen that people give them food and so on, because probably there's, some family members that are going to think, oh, I know they're communists, but like it's still my child,
Yeah, it's my mum in this situation. Yeah, I've been removed to this piece of land, and my mum thinks, oh, should probably give him some dinner.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there would still be some help given to them, but there would be no obligation to give them any help.
Well, yeah, I guess. So once I've become warlord of this bit of land, then would there be any route back? I guess.
Well, I think at least in my covenant, if people truly repent, then I don't see any reason why they can't be let back in. I mean, I basically view it in the same way that the Amish view ostracism from their communities, right? You're not irredeemable. If you repent, then you can get back.
Yeah, there doesn't have to even be a specific process. You can just make it obvious to whoever the city provider that you realize that, okay, this didn't work.
Yeah.
Actually, this seems like a pretty good model. It's not like you have to put in place any sort of test or exam or I don't know.
Well, there would probably be a legal process, but basically, I think it would be a case of making a public statement that you denounce all ideologies that are against private property rights, and you repent for your sins, and then you can be forgiven.
I thought we've now made being a communist a sin, as it should be.
Well, it's coveting your neighbor's ox, isn't it?
That is correct.
Yeah, it is a sin. Yeah.
That like people saying Jesus was a socialist, it makes me. I mean, I'm not even a Christian, but like.
And to be completely fair, right? Like, there's people like Thomas Sowell that, when they were young, they were Marxists.
Yeah. Peter Hitchens as well.
Then they learn the error of their ways, and they become productive members of society. And in many cases, even because they've learned the error of their ways, they become staunch protectors of private property rights.
Yeah, so you end up with either Peter Hitchens, Thomas Sowell, or the other way you get Blair, who was a Trotskyist in his youth, but became something else.
Yeah,
or appeared to become something else.
Yeah, I mean, he's still a Trotskyist.
Well, he hides his power levels. Yeah, just trying to think of. So I've got this list of questions that I'm working my way down here. So I guess if you, so say that you set up a business in this area. Like, I'm trying to think, because you said that they would have a what's it called, a quota of people from the native population in, is it Uruguay, that they have to hire if they want to set up a business there. So presumably those people commute from outside.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of the free private city, would that be allowed if you're supposed to be living there as well as working there?
Well, again, it depends on the covenant, but I would prefer that you have the ability, as long as you're not, an activist, that you can get into the private city. Actually, I would point to Singapore for the laws on this matter. In Singapore, if you're a foreign national, you're not allowed to protest.
Really?
Yeah, political activism done by foreigners in Singapore is illegal. You will be arrested.
As it should be.
That's really interesting. I guess that makes more sense in Singapore being a city in sort of within, is it Malaysia?
No, they're sovereign.
Well, yeah, they are sovereign, but they are surrounded. Well, they are,
they're on the coast of Malaysia.
Yeah. So it's more possible than, say, some American commie turning up in England and protesting, right?
Yeah.
I see it as definitely easier for some Malaysians to slip in if they're coming in and out to work already.
Well, there's lots of Malaysians that commute into Singapore to work. Like, literally hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, I'm sure. I guess that the people who come in and out, I suppose, would have different rights to the people who already live there, if we want to use the word rights.
Yeah. I mean, you have around Singapore, there's literally cities that have been built just for people that work in Singapore. Like in Malaysia, there's a lot of people that live there. Actually, we have no, never mind. Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of cities around it where you can live and commute into Singapore. And I think the same would be the case in a free private city. There might be some that are like more restrictive, akin to something like Orania in South Africa, where literally if you're not an Afrikaner, then you're not allowed in. But in most areas in the world, I think it would be a benefit to the private city to have outside labor come in and help.
Yeah, because I guess it's very difficult for a modern city to be entirely self-sufficient, even in things like food or energy or whatever. If you want to set up
ultimately you're going to have to import food, and there's going to be some people on the ships that are dropping off the food or the trucks or whatever. I mean, that's just how it is. But there would be a difference between entering the city for like business purposes or travel or whatever, and actually living there.
Holiday.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that these places would be pretty clean and nice places to be, even if you just wanted to visit for a couple of weeks.
I mean, I'd be happy to go and visit a city like that. Although I'm more of a out in the backwoods of Montana ranching kind of person. In terms of where
you could also have private cities in areas like that. I don't see.
That's actually what's more like a free private county rather than a city. It's more rural.
Fair point.
Yeah, a private county would be great.
That's something else I was thinking about. Kind of. Again, something that Sam and I were laughing about with the space stuff is that you could have ones that are cities and you can have ones that are just bits of farmland. It's not unreasonable to think the same would apply here.
Mm-hmm.
In that you have some that are cities on islands near other countries, but you might have, as you say, in the backwards parts of Montana, there's a whole area of the land where the people live there just decide we're going to have our own.
The reason I don't think so much about that is because it's definitely not the first step, right? Because to get the sovereignty, like the political sovereignty, you need a lot of economic power, and you don't get that with a county.
It would be a lot harder to persuade a host nation to let you do that.
Yeah,
with just a bit of farmland. If you wanted to have, I'm thinking more of like rural English counties.
Mm-hmm.
Have free private like Suffolk or something.
Free private
Suffolk Stan.
Yorkshire or
Cumbria. Well, of the Republic of not Republic, but the the state of Cumbria. That sounds amazing. They don't do anything other than tourism, really.
I mean, hey, as soon as the private county of Montana is set up, I'll definitely be selling a lot of beef and horses.
Yeah, I guess the economic is a good point because Cumbria is just tourism. To be honest, within England, if you look at the areas of the country that actually positively contribute towards the UK's economy, it's like a bit of the southeastern London. So you'd have to find some way to either make a deal with the bits that are contributing, or you'd have to be self-sufficient.
There's a guy that commented the covenant sounds like social contract theory.
Like Rousseau.
It is it's different than social contract theory in the sense that social contract theory just assumes tacit approval, whereas the covenant requires you to opt in.
Yeah, it's like a literal thing that you sign, not just something that you assume to agree to.
Yes.
Cal Help says, market the camps as gulags. They seem fine with them. So you said, I thought all these articles doing apologia for the gulags. Just say, I thought they were, just nice prison places. They're not horrible and horrific.
We're going to market them as a nice vacation spot where you are permanently.
Yes, you have to live according to your beliefs, I guess. I think,
each according to their ability, to each according to their need.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was talking to AI Shayatori about this, that like the idea of having equality before the law, like, is that a good idea? And yeah, I mean, my conception of what equality is good is getting eroded every day.
Yeah, I don't believe in equality before the law. I don't think that is actually a thing. I mean, it's a nice, goal to have when you're designing a system, that it should be relatively, applied relatively even across society. But it is always the case that there are some people that have, access to better lawyers or access to better political connections.
Yeah, it's about like not writing into law that if you have over a certain amount of money, then you can get away with this.
Right.
Like it's the fact that you write it into law that everyone is like
But
found
there's a difference between, de jure and de facto, and so it
Sure,
depends
yeah,
on
yeah.
what level
Yeah.
you're talking about. And I think most people, when you say equality before the law, I don't think people actually think deeply enough about it. People just look at the outcomes, and when you're looking at outcomes, you're looking at de facto, not de jure.
Yeah. I'm thinking de jure.
Now, what I should say on this is I was actually recently on the Hoppy and Butch Club just last Sunday, and this was one of the topics that we were talking about as we were reading 2 chapters of Ludwig von Mises's Socialism. And part of that was getting into equality before the law, which really isn't a good term. A better term would be rule of law, because then everyone is beholden to the law, and it allows judges to go and do different interpretations as needed for that law. Because not everything is so clear cut. So of course there will be different outcomes and rulings.
Well, yeah, it's back to Bezos and his taxes. That's why he gets away with it, because there's so much to take into account, and there's so many rules that he can get around it because he can afford smart people.
Maybe I can say something from the Jude perspective here, which is a part of Denmark called Jutland. So we have a very ancient legal tradition in Denmark, especially in Jutland. And one of the things that it says above most of the old courthouses in Jutland is law er hver mands eje, and it means the law is every man's property. And I think that encapsulates like the meaning better than equality before the law.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to talk about Dane law there, and as an Englishman, I was going to object.
Well, that is one of the principles of Dane law, actually. Dane law is quite interesting, I think, because like concepts like tort law, for example, in common law, that comes from Dane law.
I think when he means Dane law, I think he meant the Danish rule over part of the British Isles.
Yes.
Dane law has a double meaning. Dane law both refers to that area that was under Danish law, but it also refers to the particular legal system that the Danes brought with them.
Yes, it is interesting, and I would be interested to see the sort of evolution of that, because obviously English common law is something that we know about in England. Whether or not it still applies anymore is entirely different, but my knowledge of it doesn't go back that far in history. So
there's concepts from that still exist today, like the price of a man, for example, is something that was established under Dane law, and that's still used when, for example, calculating insurance premiums and
so how much to pay if you die.
But also how much you pay for your insurance and all of this, like the price that the insurance company has to pay. For example, if you lose a hand or if you lose a leg or whatever, right? The idea that there is a price for a man that has to be paid, that has to be paid either to the man himself if it's only part of his body that he loses, or to the family of the man if they lose a provider, for example. That concept comes from Dane law.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess this makes me interested in like what part of ancient Danish culture that idea comes from, because it obviously hasn't come from everywhere in the world, but that's really, really off topic.
The problem is it goes so far back that I don't really think anybody knows. Danish culture goes all the way back to Viking Age and before that.
No, I know the Danish flag is one of the oldest, isn't it?
Yeah, and we didn't write anything down during the Viking time, really. We had runes and so on, but it's like the things that it says on rune stones is things like, oh, here lies this guy, he did this and this. Like that's basically it.
Yeah. This is what I found very interesting reading about the Anglo-Saxons, is that they had the chronicle written down, which was actually, thinking about it, having a civilization chronicle itself, 1,000 or more years ago, was actually pretty mad. And if you read it, it goes back to the beginning of time pretty much. Like they put in a lot of biblical stuff at the start.
Yeah. Whereas what we know about Viking history is all stuff that was brought down through oral tradition and then only written down several hundred years after the end of the Viking Age.
Yeah.
So it is pretty spotty what we know about it. But there are some documents that we still have that are very old. Like, for example, Jewish law was written down. So we know actually quite a lot about the legal system of the Vikings.
I'd be interested to compare it to Roman law, actually, because I know Roman law has a lot of contract stuff in it. It's pretty much all based on contractual agreements.
Yeah, where Viking law was more based on tort.
Yeah,
if you're familiar with that legal concept.
No, maybe I don't think so. No, thinking about it.
Well, an example of tort is that example I gave before with the price of a man, where there is a certain like you have some kind of wrong that was done to a person, and there has to be repayment by the perpetrator.
Right. Yeah. I said. Roman law is more. It's interesting. Roman law is a lot of it is also based on contracts, which I guess is more relevant to the city stuff. But it's interesting that Roman law still is more of a thing in Scotland than it is in England, even though the Scottish weren't ever under the control of the Romans.
Yeah, well, that's probably because Scotland was under the influence of the French for a very long time diplomatically.
That's true. Yeah, they decided that the only people worse than the English were the French for them, or better than the English, I guess.
No, they decided the only people worse than the French were the English.
Yeah, that way around. Yeah. Fucking Scots.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean,
you can kind of understand them because you haven't exactly been best of pals over the years.
Lies, Scottish propaganda. Yeah, English. I mean, ancient English is basically Danish. Like, they're very similar languages.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, the word, you don't really use the word anymore, but like the word bode, for example, that stems from the ancient Danish bøde, which means like repayment or fine.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. I was going to say something else about that, but it slipped out of my mind.
In my world.
JD wants to set up the city of Wessex. Well, I've said before that I can trace my ancestry back to Alfred. So any Danes getting uppity with me will face that.
I think we can basically all trace our ancestry back to anybody in Europe.
Well, for me, apparently, according to my mum, it's direct. She's done a lot of research on it. But yes, I know.
So you're the one true king of England, is what you're saying.
Well, technically, it'd be my uncle. I'd be like sixth in line or something after his sons, and then my other uncle.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just more of a meme than anything. It's quite funny. I think if you go, I guess it kind of unifies with the Northern German, Saxon, Danish tradition. Then if you go back even further, you end up with the Saxons who came from Northern Germany.
Or Southern Jutland, however you want to say it.
However.
Well, the Angles is more than the Saxons.
Well, I think with Alfred, you can trace from him. It goes back to the first Saxons. But yeah, that's again kind of off topic here. I guess the whole point of these private cities, I suppose, is a lot of it getting rid of the corrupting aspects of democracy that we kind of see.
Mm-hmm.
I guess a question you're going to get from, commies, is going to be, if you have this significantly more capitalist society, what is to stop a rich person going to the city service providers and basically buying more?
Oh, we having the car king debate.
Potentially.
Embrace the car king.
If Jeff Bezos decides Jeff Bezos decides to set up his move to your private city, he wants to base Amazon there. That will obviously bring you a lot more economic power, having Amazon based in your private city. Jeff says, I'd actually like more security on my house, and I'd like you to get me a bigger house. This guy wants to buy the house here, but I'm going to offer you some to get rid of his offer. Say, how would you go about dealing with that? Because obviously that would be immoral if that guy's going to offer more money.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of thing is possible, can happen, yeah. Just like it could happen under a state, and does happen under a state.
Right, yeah, so that would be the argument.
Human nature is human nature. It's just, that's just what it is. And I'm under no illusion that a private law society would be like an eternal thing, right? At some point, these, what I would consider low probability events, at some point, one of them is going to happen. Fortunately, hopefully at that time, there is a lot of competition in the space, so then you can move somewhere else.
That would be the idea, isn't it? Is the sort of self-correcting nature of it. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody who, is just, I don't know what word to use them. Maybe not necessarily commie, just a sort of normal person.
Yeah. I mean, and they're valid concern. I don't want to minimize that that concern or anything. I just
because that's the point, isn't it?
One of the mistakes that people often make is they have this perfect picture in their mind of what fairness and justice looks like, right? And what they then do is they hold private law society up against this, rather than holding it up against the reality that we currently live in. And that's not really a fair comparison, right?
Yeah, it's the Thomas Sowell compared to what question?
Exactly. Yeah. Compared to what? And I think on the topic of corruption, obviously one of the topics that we need to touch on, which is also very timely right now because of the whole Hunter Biden thing, is nepotism. And I think actually one of the reasons that nepotism is so prevalent in our current society is because, first of all, we don't like talking about it. Secondly, we kind of know that we're all nepotistic in nature, but we just don't want to admit it. And thirdly, I think one of the ways that you could actually deal with it is a little bit uncomfortable to think about, which is embrace that it's a thing, and just take it into account when you're dealing with people. And that was how they dealt with this in the Republic of Genoa. Like, they were well aware that when you were dealing with a Doria, he was going to look out for the interest of the Doria family. And when you're dealing with a Grimaldi, he was going to look out for the interest of the Grimaldi family. And when you dealt with one of the plebeian families in one of the Campagnas, which is like defense pacts, like they're also known as medieval communes, it doesn't mean the same thing as it does now, a commune back then.
No.
A commune was literally just a defense pact between the citizens of an area or residents of an area. So you took it into account that obviously people first look out for their family, and then they look out for their friends, and only then do they start caring about the other people in the community. And I think that's the healthy way to think about it, because that is how human nature is. That is
something that seems self-evident to me, but again, when talking to people in real life about this, they don't want to admit that. When I say that, like, the circle of people that you care about, it's not all equal, it's ranked. Like, you care about your family first, then you go out to your wider circle of friends, then out and out until people living in other countries or whatever. I'd include your fellow countrymen.
Let's say that you're walking along a road, and like you're walking with some family members and some friends and some people that you don't know, and maybe even some people that you hate, and then you have like a highway robber that puts a gun to all of these people's heads and tells you, if you don't tell me to shoot one of them, I'm going to shoot all of them. Who are you going to pick? Like, be honest,
yeah, exactly.
It's going to be the guy that you hate or the guy that you don't know, right? Like, one of the two.
Yeah, I guess when you said nepotism, I more thought the the idea of basically you putting your son in a position, say, whether or not, I mean, why would you put your son in a position if he wasn't in a position to be good at that, say?
Yeah, I mean that's I think that's a symptom of that same thing, right? It's just that I think when you put people in that theoretical position, it becomes very clear to them that they actually think this way. Whereas if you're saying like, oh, would you hire, your son to do a job even though he wasn't the best for it and so on, a lot of people would say, no, I don't think I would do that. Even though they probably actually would, if they're put in the position where they sort of need to.
Well, I guess with a family member, you like how good you are at a job is also a factor in that, is how trustworthy you are.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can trust your son more than some random stranger, even if that stranger may have better qualifications or whatever, then maybe it's better to put your son in that position.
Yeah, because maybe your son is going to stay there for 10 years, while the random stranger, you don't know how many years he's going to stay. So eventually your son is probably going to get better anyway.
Yeah, and also, frankly, if I ever actually do get some land out west, yeah, I'm going to be teaching my son everything I know on how to go and run it, so that then it stays in the family, because I don't trust strangers as much as my own kin.
Plus, you love your own kin more than somebody else. They're your legacy, right?
This is what I was going to kind of push back to Jack here, was I wouldn't say that people put, I mean, ideally people don't put the individual as in themselves above their family a lot of the time. They will sacrifice a lot for their family.
Yeah. And even for friends, and even for like the tribe as well, right? You can see that throughout history. People go to war because they want to protect their family and friends and their tribe. And but where it becomes very apparent that you don't care the same about all people is when you really compare the people that you care the most about with the people you care the least about.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, you get somebody that you don't know versus somebody that you love dearly. You are going to be more than prepared to cut the head off the guy you don't know.
Yeah, and if you put me in a position where I could jump in front of my brother to take a bullet for him, I would do it, and like without thinking about it.
Mm.
So I definitely don't rank myself above all of my family members. There's certainly some of them I rank myself above. But no, yeah, there is. I mean, it's not all family members I love the same, right? I'm not going to mention who it is that I wouldn't take a bullet for, but
if your brother's watching, then he knows that he's well loved. Everyone else has to keep an eye out for any gunmen when you're nearby.
I definitely also do it for my mom, just to be safe. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think we can understand that.
Yeah.
JD says his son will inherit his collection of 40k novels.
Oh yeah, that means he definitely loves him.
I mean, that's the whole concept of inheritance, isn't it? It's like you don't trust anyone else with your property, and like if
I love the thing that actually Milton Friedman had a great quote about this. He did a lot of these debate forums where normal people came up and like suggested policies, and then he would tear them in a new asshole.
I've seen a few videos of those. Yeah, they're quite good.
Yeah, and one of them was a guy that came up and said like, "Oh, why don't we just do 100% inheritance?" And one of the points he made in his reply to that was that he said one of the things that I have never fully understood why is the fact that parents care more about the utility that their children are going to get from their wealth than the utility that they themselves get from their wealth.
Yes.
And you should not underestimate the importance of this in a societal scale.
I know people like to shit on Jordan Peterson a bit, but one of his rules was something like treat yourself as somebody that you are responsible for looking after. And that's kind of taken into account that the people care about others around them. They'll care about a dog or a kitten more than they will about themselves in a lot of situations. Like they will go out of their way and pay a lot of money for veterinary bills for their dog, but they won't take their own medication. They won't, they might push back to paying bills for for themselves, for medical bills, that sort of thing.
Oh yeah, JD has seen it. One of the other quotes from that is where we live in a family society.
I guess that's something that
individualist society.
That's something that libertarians get kind of a lot of stick for, to be honest. It's for quote unquote being only for the individual, which is very much not the case.
Well, it is the case for a lot of lulbirds. They're like, oh, methodological
Yeah,
individualism applies on a metaphysical level, like fucking idiots.
Yeah, the sort of egoist types.
Some random person just told me on Messenger. Anyways, as I was saying, yeah, that is the case for the Beltway. That's why I completely ignore them now. And whenever I don't, it's mainly just to insult them.
Yeah, you've had some fun with with wet libertarians on Twitter. I've seen they are.
Oh yeah, they've tried to dox me. They failed. They didn't even come close. One of them I got banned twice.
Wait, they tried to dox you?
Yes, Jeremiah Harding tried to dox me. That was fun.
Fuck me. Jesus.
They never dox close, and they never will. But yeah.
Selfless actions are always motivated by the unconscious benefit of the self. Well, I guess if you count the warm fuzzy feeling you get from looking after your family or your cat or whatever, I guess if you count that as what's important to you as is benefiting the self.
Yeah, I mean that's true, but it just when all you're saying is that people prioritize themselves over family, then that's clearly not the case, right? Because they are prioritizing de facto family over themselves, even if it is what they personally want.
Yeah, okay, yeah. If you are fulfilling your own need by looking after your family, then I suppose, yes, you are prioritizing yourself first, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a nitpicky thing. In reality, we are primarily a family society, right? I think we all agree on that.
Yes. Do you think the individualism collectivism dichotomy is a bit inaccurate? In some ways, individualist and in others, collectivist. Well, it's like if you want to treat, I don't know, white people as a collective,
versus, which you shouldn't.
Which you shouldn't.
Yeah.
I shouldn't even have to say
From
that.
my point of view, the way in which the dichotomy is correct is in terms of methodology. If you're starting from the point of the collective when you're analyzing things, then you're going to get a lot of things wrong. Whereas if you start from the point of individualism and, as part of that, recognize that there are also social influences on the individual, then you're going to be, in most cases, correct.
Yes, people like that. The individual is I guess the smallest unit of things that can make a decision, I suppose. If you
humans act, collectives don't act.
Yeah. So like my brain inside my skull can make a decision, but my brain and your brain can't make a decision collectively. No. Unless we, I guess, talk about it or whatever. Like it's not. We're not telepathic.
The best thing you can do really is the language games, as Wittgenstein put it. You can try and paint a picture in the other person's mind, and then maybe your brains decide to do the same thing, but not necessarily. Even if you think you agree, you might not.
If you present the same facts to different people, they will quite often come to different conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
What's Jack saying again? It's paradoxical to not be entirely self-centered in everything. It's literally impossible to prioritize anyone over the individual self. Again, if you want to use the nitpick that you are prioritizing your family because you're prioritizing yourself, then I suppose. But in reality, if you're taking a bullet for your family member, you will, I guess, in practice, you're prioritizing the family member.
Yeah, as I said, definitely on the methodological level, it's useful to think about it from an individualist perspective. But beyond that, on a metaphysical level, when you're talking about general universalities between how humans act, I think it's kind of wankery, that, like, to the point that it kind of obscures the reality a little bit to to not talk about humanity as fundamentally a family-based society.
I wouldn't go higher than the family. I wouldn't say we're a nationalist society or whatever.
No. Well, yeah, I mean, you can make certain tendency arguments on the tribal and nation society level, but fundamentally, the universality is that all people tend to be family oriented.
And if they're not, they're usually fucked up in some way.
Yeah, I mean, there are psychopaths that are not family oriented.
Well, I mean,
but there.
I can't even begin to count the amount of people my own age who I've spoken to have said they don't want kids or family or whatever when they're older. It's depressing as hell.
He's like, it's not a nitpick. It's extremely important. It's important to you. I would say it's important to me as well that recognizing that the reality is family oriented.
What was I going to say? Every nitpick is important to the nitpicker. Let's go there. I can't remember what I was about to say. I guess on the level of tribes, you are. I guess you consider a tribe to be a few families, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the people who are genetically related to you.
You can talk about like unions of families through marriage and things like that. There's some general tendencies with.
True. But then you get tribes who seek out other tribes to marry within.
Yeah.
I guess an example is Genghis Khan. I think his wife is from a neighboring tribe, and that was set up by his own tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well we've done over 2 hours, so I think we'll start wrapping this up then. So, is there anything you guys want to add with regards to private cities or any other of our tangents?
No, but maybe just reiterate that if people are interested in the concept, then I recommend checking out freeprivatecities.com, prospera.hn. And I also recommend reading Hans Adam II's book, The State in the Third Millennium, which you can find on LibGen if you're into that sort of thing. He's the Prince of Liechtenstein and a close friend of Hans Hermann Hoppe, and I think it's a very interesting read for people that are interested in the general topic. And otherwise, then pick up a bunch of Hoppe's books. They're all good.
Yeah. JD's asking for a Discord link. Is that for the Hoppe server?
Yes, probably. I will tell you straight off, like the people that are joining it, there is quite a long approval process for actually becoming a member, and a part of becoming a member is that people that want to join either have to be Hoppian, so they have to want to learn about Hopianism. So if you're not there for that, then it's not the right place for you. But I'll create an invite link here. Just give me a sec.
Yeah, if you drop that to me now, I'll stick it in the description. I think I'm safely in the camp of the wanting to learn about it more. So yeah, and I've also joined the other day.
If possible, I'd like its DMs to me. And I think I was banned last year when I was still a Walbert. I've changed. Now I'm pretty much a Hoppian.
Yeah, I posted the link to you in DM
Thank you.
Also in the private chat.
Sweet.
Okay, Chicago, have you got anything else to add?
Aside from what Mathias said, no. But I should also reiterate that you should always keep an open mind for how society can alternatively be structured. Because, well, that would be how we bring about libertarianism, as we can't use the Westphalian system for state. And therefore, that means that we need to go and find alternatives. And this is by far one of the best and most thought out alternatives. So.
Yeah. I mean, as for me, I'm always interested in ideas for how we could live in the future, and this is something that I'm extremely interested in, and will definitely be learning more about. I might sign up to the newsletter, get the book as well. For everyone else, what else do I have? I've got a couple of things to shill, I guess. Coincidentally, they're both to do with Mr. Economic Erudite. So I will be on his stream later playing Crusader Kings. So this evening at 9 p.m. UK time. So
going to see how many people bang Harian's wife.
Yep, that's going to be. I think I kidnapped his wife, and his mother. So I have banged both his wife and his mother before.
Oh, you absolute lad!
Yeah, no, I broke into his castle and stole them and kidnapped them. And also on Wednesday, I will be on his channel again, as he started a new stream series, just getting people on who are know about things to give presentations on them. So just sort of a varying degree of topics. So Harry Ingladiv has already talked about rocks and geology so far. I will be talking about relativity in black holes, I think. Seeing as that's something that I did quite a lot at university. Seeing if I might, as an extra challenge to myself, try and teach the economists some maths. I think the Austrian economists some maths. I think that could be interesting.
They're not gonna like
that. It's got nothing to do with human action, so we're all right. Okay, well, thank you very much, both of you guys.
One last thing, sorry, I forgot to mention I mentioned a couple of other streams through this stream.
Okay.
One of them was with Academic Agent, and the other one with Radical Liberation. The one with Academic Agent is called The Private Production of Civilization, and the one with RadLib was on geoeconomics.
Cool. I will. Yeah, you just sent them to me. I'll link them below as well.
Yeah, if anybody's interested, we're talking a lot about free private cities in both of them. In the geoeconomics one, we get into these concepts after about 40 minutes to an hour, as far as I remember. So you can skip the first part, but I think the first part is actually very interesting if you want to know, how the geopolitical game is changing to our advantage. Actually, if you're one of the people like me that want to see one of these free private cities come into existence. So yeah, highly recommend checking those out.
Excellent. Well, thank you to both of you. Thank you especially to Chicago for stepping up at the last minute. I only got you on this morning, so thank you.
Always happy to. Feel free to join. Let me know when you need a guest or co-host at last minute.
That's great. Thank you very much, and cheers, Matthias. I've been told by certain sources to bully you into getting social media, so start a YouTube channel. Maybe I need something to link as well to let people know where to find you, if anywhere.
Yeah, I've actually bought all the equipment for it, but
okay.
I just, I run a company, so it's very limited the amount of time that I have, and I hope to eventually get to it.
Sounds like
I do have a couple of scripts where I've already written for it, so eventually, I promise it will happen, but probably not before the beginning of next year.
That's not too far away. 2021. Well, that's the white pill for the 2021 rather than 2020.
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you to both of you guys, and I guess I will see everyone else next week. I don't even know what we're going to be talking about next week. As I said, Sam's been ill, so I'll have a chat with him, see how he's getting on. Everyone, press F for Sam. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Thank you very much. Take care.